In this video, I would like to show you two simple ways how you could create elevation views in Fusion. So in AutoCAD, basically, majority-wise, you draw simply on your ground plane because it's the easiest way. You can also always change your 3D view, and then you still see the ground plane. So there you actually would have to adjust the way how the ground plane is oriented, or the grid, which is a lot of work. And nicely, Fusion, because it is more oriented for making objects, it is a little bit more flexible. So here, for example, we have our ground plane. And let's say where we would like to create a wall thickness. Let's say we're building a room. So offset this one maybe 6 inches inwards. Okay. And let's say this should be a booth where people could walk onto. And maybe I only want to have 2 lines, so these 2 lines I delete. And then, for example, with extend, here you see, I can extend those lines. Perfect. Now for these 2 edges, I don't really need any elevation views, but maybe for here. So there are now 2 ways how we actually can do that. One way is simply you create yourself an offset plane, and I click, for example, on this orientation from the origin. In case you do not see those, you have to turn the light on. And then I move this one accordingly to where I need it to be. So I think it's 10 feet if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And hold on. I don't really see where the piece is. Let me do this one again. So this one, there. Okay, 10 feet. Perfect. Alternatively, or not alternatively, in addition, I can do the same here. Here, for example, I move this one a little bit further away. So you see basically what I'm talking about. Now I can create a sketch on this plane. And then if everything lines up with my grid, which in my case it does not, now I have a little bit of a tricky thing. So what I can do in this case is I can, for example, project this line into my sketch. And then you see here with this line, now I can snap to it. And for example, create my geometry there. Now let's go to here and let's make another sketch on this plane. And then I simply project this one line over as well. There, you see now it pops up there. And let's say this wall should be really tall, 14 feet. It's a lot, but let's keep it just for the sake of the demonstration. And there you see now, if I go to a right view, I see that elevation. If I go to this view, I see that elevation. If I go into top view, I only see, of course, my top view. If I go into perspective mode, so you see you can have the elevation right next, or actually you can move it further away. Each one really works. Because the nice thing is, you know, this is all parametric. I can simply move also this one closer and further. So not really a big deal. Okay, if for example I would like this one to move perfectly to this edge, I could actually measure this point till there. That's 19 feet, as you can see. So I used the measure tool, and then here I simply type in 19 feet, and there it fits. Okay, another way, actually I got this idea from something Linda showed me in her presentation book. We're going to create a plane along a line. So plane along path, you actually know. See this this plane moves along it and it's perpendicular to it. I actually would like a plane that's parallel to it. So you can use this plane along an angle. Click. And here's the funny part now. We can create a sketch. Okay. And then maybe we can 3D include this line. And for example, say here, I'm just creating stuff right now. You can do, for example, something like this. There. Perfect. Okay. So now in top view, for example, you see how everything is unfolded. And here's the funny thing now. If we go into edit, we can change actually this degree. So we rotate this construction plane 90 degrees. Okay. And take a look at that. Then also our sketch got rotated. But as you can see, maybe a little bit too much. So, okay. So let's see what we can do with the sketch. We just go in, because nothing here really is constrained. So again, it's you have to put in your dimensions. So see, all I do is just add those dimensions in. It's our constraint. You don't need it. Yeah, okay. And that's fine. Okay, let's try this one out one more time. Let's give this one, what is it, 90? Yep, 90. Okay. And there it is. See? Perfect. Nothing changed. Okay, so that was, for example, a small tip into how to use the construction planes in two different ways. So you can work with side views and front view and top view, like what I would do, consider like when I do exhibition design. Because I don't necessarily use the term elevation view. I mean, essentially they all do the same, it's just a different word. But when I say side view or front view, I basically mean an elevation view just from a specific orientation already. In the next video, then I will go into how maybe, for example, we can create some cabinetry. So here we are back. And what I would like to do now is actually create a wall, and that has 3 feet and then a 9 feet high. And you see something here is cut out. Now this is my elevation view, and I use the elevation view more or less, to be honest, just as a reference. I actually work most of the time simply with my floor plan. So if I measure this line, I see this line is 16 feet long. So and that means if I go into my sketch here and then say from here 16 feet, that's kind of like there actually on this grid. Okay, and then if I zoom in, click and click, and make myself a line. And there now, for example, that's now 16 feet. If I want, I can actually apply like a dimension. Maybe from this one to, oh, okay, hold on here. I just have to select these two lines so the software understands actually what I'm talking about. 16. Hey, where did you go to? No, that's not where you should be. Okay, here. Let's move you. Let's press escape so I can move this one up there. Okay, stop sketch. And you know, if I go to the sketch, right click and say show dimension, I see those dimensions. And the main reason is for that, if I type in 15, you see I can adjust this line. Okay. Now I can go ahead and say extrude this small part exactly 3 feet. Perfect. And let's show the sketch. Go to extrude and select maybe this one. And then here we go up as much. What did we say? 12 feet. Yeah, I think so. 12 feet. Okay, perfect. Now there you see basically how I, with 2 steps, created my floor plan geometry. So I had elements I could easily extrude up. And the nice thing, you see I did this with 2 commands, but the second command actually has the operation join. So instead of creating a new body, you see here's a line, I just created it as one object. So this looks basically like a huge rectangle where I cut this part out. I could also have built the whole piece higher and then cut this part out. Works as well. I simply prefer to have this one marked already on my floor plan. Okay, so next step. Let's say we would like to have somewhere some shelves. So let's say on here I would like to have some shelves. So there are 2 ways how we can do this. Let me go to edit sketch. See that? You will see why I'm stressing so much. You need for next class have to have all your dimensions ready. No excuse, and that means where stuff should be, how high, material thickness. You have multiple days to measure that out. That has to be done by next class. Otherwise, you cannot proceed with next lecture. So, let's say, I'm curious actually how long a line here is. 1 foot, no, that's a lot. Maybe let's say a foot. Okay, so we would like to have maybe from this corner point, let's say 1.5 feet out till there, go in, stop. Okay, so there's a rectangle. Now this rectangle, for example, I could extrude. Let's say this whole piece should be 6 inches thick. And let me go back and say no, do not join, just make a new object. Okay, and then this object I simply move up. Let's say from this bottom part I can either use the grid, or I could also say maybe from this point, oh no, not this point to this point. So for example, they're lined up perfectly. Okay, great. And then I can copy and paste. Where's bodies? There. Copy and paste. And for example, move 2 feet up. Okay. Paste. Move this one now 4 feet up. Paste. And let's move it so high up that probably not many people will be able to reach it. Okay, well, I hope that basically you started seeing like how quickly then we started to copy and paste all these objects and move them around. So that wasn't really too difficult. Alternatively, what we can do is actually we do this. Here, check this one out. So we go to pattern on a path, and we say this object, path. Luckily, in our case, we can select this line. And then we say, we move multiples, and maybe 3 or 4. And maybe move everything exactly 7 feet. Okay, there. You see, same result, just with one command. So if you have something like this, that is what I would do, because you can always nicely then at one point adjust the distance between these parts. So that's a really, really nice tool. Okay. So that was basically the way how maybe I would build this one. Alternatively, let me hide this one. What we also can do, but this can actually make things then a little bit more complicated later when you really want to shove and move stuff around. But I just feel like it's still good to know. Let's say I create a line and I make a new sketch. Actually, I sketch it on this wall. And I go to this point here, go to there, and then we set 6 inches. Okay, 90 degrees, and let's move back and stop sketch. And then what do we do? 1.5, yeah, 1.5 feet. And then basically from this wall there, you see this part, now I can extrude 1.5 feet and move it out as a new object. Okay. So that, for example, worked as well. The downside with this approach would be you have the sketch on an elevation view and not on the ground plane. And I honestly, I prefer always putting everything on the ground plane and then moving my parts vertically up and down. So the way how I showed it first is probably the way how I would do it. Now let's say somewhere you would like to have a presentation table that actually can be used to show or to place goods onto. So we could go ahead and, for example, go into our floor plan. You see, I started sketching everything into this part. And maybe let's start with a line. And let's say we just do it here. 8 feet by maybe 3 feet there. Okay, stop sketch. And then, yes, you guessed it, we can simply go and say extrude, move this one up, maybe 3 feet. Okay. Now actually, if you would like to adjust everything, we move, let's say, for example, this object. And we can move it around, we can move this part. So that's pretty nice. So I don't really do much with the sketch. I try to preliminarily put the correct lines for this part in, but then I rather, instead of rotating the sketch, etc., I can do something like this. Also, FYI, if I go back into edit and then I say, please dimension me those lines. Okay. And then I say, yeah, this one 5 feet. You see the 3D object adjusts as well. So that's really nice. And if you don't like how everything got moved, well, we could simply delete it. And then it snaps back to where we created it. So that's, for example, our part. Now let's say you would like to create something like this, but maybe the whole part inside should be hollow. Now think about this kind of like we core this one out. There are 2 ways now. We can build first kind of like this block we have, and then onto one side we create a sketch. And because I would like things maybe to be even, I'm going to offset this line a little bit inwards. Okay, perfect. And then this line, actually, I move up to there. Perfect. So, and then I go to extrude, select this face and push it through and cut everything out. So you see, that was actually really easy. Now let's say what happens if actually I'm going to move actually my body in the timeline at that point. So let's see. Hold on. I actually would like to do it here. So move maybe from there to there, and then we just rotate this a little bit. Okay, let's go back. And you see there were some some problems. So whenever you do any of these designs, in this case, I have to do the move after, you know, I cut everything out. So just try to follow this mentality of you've fully built everything you want and then you can rearrange them. Otherwise, I think what we would have to do is actually go to edit sketch there. And you know what I need to do to make sure nothing explodes is simply I have to put those constraints in. So the software really understands actually when it's rotating the object and it's rotating the sketch that it simply doesn't start to change these things for me. Maybe this might have been already enough. Let's take a look if we can do it actually here. Let's just rotate it a lot there. Let's move it over. Yeah, you see, that's fine. Okay. So I could alternatively, if I know, for example, from the beginning, I would like to build a bench or something like this that is cored out. Maybe do something like this. I go to a side view and I'm creating myself a new sketch. Now let's say you have multiple objects, and if you now go into elevation views for all these objects and everything is in there, it can get kind of confusing when you put everything onto one and the same sketch. So I'm going to create myself a new sketch onto this plane. And for example, I go to somewhere here, there, go over, let's say that far, go down, there, 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 here. Okay, stop sketch. Now you see there's kind of like that geometry. Let me hide this body for the moment so it's not distracting. And then this whole piece, for example, I extrude out 3 feet. Now if I want to give it some roundings, go ahead, do that, like 5 inches or so. Okay. Now at this point I realized, well, maybe I would like to have still a small bar in between. Okay, then maybe I can go back to the sketch, zoom in, go to my drawing tool and say somewhere here, place, add a little bit more of geometry. So you see I draw these lines. Whoa, it's not there. Oh, that's the extrude, and that's fine. So I go back to the extrude, for example, and then shift click, or sorry, control click this one, add it to it, and for example, extrude it out. Let's say there should be a small connection so it doesn't fall down. So then I can go back to the correct sketch, edit sketch, and simply say make a line here, make a line here. You know, all this actually I would like to trim together, so I click trim, maybe cut this part out, stop sketch, there. And let's go edit again, control click this part, okay, and there. The only problem with this part is if we apply material to it, it is actually just one object. In real life, this actually would be made out of multiple parts. Let's say most of this first part can be bent plywood, but then those boards here, they have to be built, if you want to be more correct, as separate elements. So I cannot simply just use one command for that. So what I have to do is basically this. I'm deselecting those elements and I'm pushing this one out. Okay. Then I go to extrude. No, actually, hold on. First, I have to go to edit sketch. And the reason is I'm putting this line back in. Okay. Let's make the sketch visible. Extrude this one. Was it 3 feet? As a new body. One more time. Extrude 3 feet as a new body. Okay. There you basically see now we have all these different objects. Now maybe at this point you start realizing why I said it's really useful when you start naming your objects, because currently all these parts are called kind of like body 14, body 15, so it doesn't really tell you a lot. So it really makes sense actually when, for example, we start maybe giving all these objects specific names. So maybe let's say product table something, and for example here this is actually walls. What do we have here? This, for example, is shelves. Wait, is that spelled correctly? Yep. Okay, perfect. And let's say maybe product table 2, and then this one we call maybe product table shelf. And honestly, I would not be too precise about this one, because I will later show you how we then are going to distribute all these different objects into more logical units. Okay, so let's keep it at this for the moment. The next step, maybe what I would like to talk about is how, for example, we could easily build, let's say, an IKEA style like rack system. So what I'm talking about is, for example, somewhere like this. So I'm making myself a new sketch. But I would like the sketch to be right where this line is. So I'm going to measure the distance from this point to this line, and that is 18.5. So offset this plane 18.5. Create myself a new sketch right on this plane there. Perfect. And all these objects, please don't show. Okay. And maybe also those sketches just disappear. So you see, the nice thing about hiding these sketches, I can see objects, I can hide objects. So it's such a nice way to work actually in 3D with drawings. And let's say I'm going to create a system like this, there, and here. Let's offset this one a little bit inwards, there. Okay. And then maybe I need some extra lines. Oh yeah, you can only, I think, offset one line at a time. A little bit annoying, but unfortunately that's the way how it is. Okay. And let's say stop sketch. And as you guessed now correctly, this one, for example, we can move out the other direction. So as a new body, for example, not 3 feet, maybe a foot. Let's make it small. Okay, and let's show those other sketches, and then here I can select all those spaces at the same time. -1 foot as new bodies. Okay. So, nice. I did not, of course, measure the distances between the different shelves based on what you have. You, of course, have to place these lines accordingly. So maybe let's go back here to the sketch. Let's hide all these other sketches and the objects. Okay. Because now what I can do is this one I'm going to fix, and this one I'm going to fix, simply so I might not be able to move them. And then I could say you and you, give me a distance. Same with this one. And same with this one. Okay. And now I'm curious, so this line and this line, how big is it? 0.4. And then this line and this line. Also, by the way, after each time I created the thing, I hit escape. Now the thing actually right now complains a little bit, which is silly. It shouldn't really. 2.4. Okay. Well, let's do it then differently. Okay, from this line down 1 point. Okay, you know what? Here, first, let's clean this one up. 0.5. So this is gone. So let's take a look at this and this. Much is that? 0.5. Okay, that is good. Now, the reason why it complained a little bit is because we start having too many of those dimensional constraints. I'm just taking this one out for the moment. And maybe 0.5 there. And then actually this one and this one. See, that's kind of silly now. So I have to move. Oh, I can't move this one up and down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is simply here I'm deleting some of these constraints and there. Put this one in there. 0.3. See, then it works. There. So probably the same here. Let's delete some of these constraints which honestly we don't really need. So this line and this one has to go because we're moving everything down. 0.5 and the whole thing will move down. You saw that because this one is 0.3, so I will move with it. So let's see if we put in another line, maybe 0.5 where that will go. That's actually there. Yeah, so maybe we put in another line here. Okay, I'm just sketching in another line. I'm going to delete some of these constraints. And then this line and this line. Make it 0.5. This line, oops, escape. This line and this line, constrained 0.3. So you see this whole part there is a little bit higher. And maybe I would like to move everything up a little bit. Well, okay, 2 feet, zip, you see everything moves up. So that's a good example of, for example, what you can do with those constraint things. 0.5, maybe keep them all even, and maybe here, that's the mid part. Maybe this one we want to be really big. I'll do it that way. Okay. Maybe this line, I would like to have a thicker bottom part so it looks a little bit more massive. So I select this line, right mouse button unfix because I had it fixed, and then I think I could easily, check out this one. I just move this one up and everything moves with it. Now this is really tight. So maybe I put this one to 2. There, stop sketch. Let's take a look at my objects. Of course, this is all garbage right now, not a big deal. So let's see which object here is what. There, that's creating the planks, that's creating the outside. Edit, simply say delete the selection, and then I should be able to select these parts again. And interestingly, what's going on there? That solver's a little bit cranky. So let's take a look. And I see already maybe why there this line is actually, that wasn't correct. There. Let's do the same here. There. Let's double check. There, everything is good. And there, there's a small hole. Okay, and no wonder it can't work, because the lines have to touch each other. So I'm not sure how I managed to do that. Actually, yeah, zip there. Okay, let's see if that actually was enough. Some already, as you can see, started to work. So edit here, not this one. There is still a problem with that sketch. Okay, so I have to go back to edit. And I see already there's a problem there. And there's the other one. So these sketches shifted a little bit. Edit. And there. Let's hide all the sketches. Let's hide this one. Okay. So I would like to make a little bit of space here. Actually, this part I'm going to move to somewhere else. So let's see. I think those are all the parts. Okay, move and say move. Maybe the sketch is getting really in my way. So this point, snap to that point, switch to 3D orientation, rotate it, go back to point, and say maybe this point, move to maybe, I don't know, to there. No, that's terrible. Let's move it back. Okay, this back point to there. Okay, and then maybe let's move this one in a little bit. Yeah, okay. For the moment, just leave it there, simply because I would like to show something else now, what we're going to do with the space there. So let's say you would like to build kind of like a table for sales personnel, and you need, of course, something different than this. You need a front plate, side plates, maybe a rack system, something inside, so that could store something. So I'm going to the sketch, go to create. This is my floor sketch. And then I start to create another line. And let's say I give them a little bit of space there and there, there. And you know what? I leave actually this one line open so I can always nicely look into it. Then I'm going to offset this one maybe by by 6 inches. Okay. And then I'm capping this. Okay. Now let's say this actually should be my kind of like the walls. So I might have to make the sketch this way if I want to be more correct. Okay. And the main reason is now I have those two objects, and again, that's true. I can lift those up, for example. One more time, this part 4, and now again, if you want to be more correct, so you could dimension all the different parts, now you have to do it object by object. Or if you want to make a quick concept model, simply in the sketch, draw this L open, so not with this line, and then you can, like in this case, create the piece at once. Because we still, for rendering, can actually apply on the faces different materials. Okay, now to put something on top, let's say a plane, or like not a plane, a tabletop, we can actually create a sketch plane. I would have to understand how high is this, 4 feet. So I could go to origin and move myself 4 feet something up. So I could draw on it. Or I could also simply click on line, and then you see I can create a sketch onto this part and do something like this. So there you see actually I created kind of like a sketch by using the end of the geometry as a helper. Main advantage of this is if I, for example, say, well, this one should be 2 feet and this one should be 2 feet. Let's hope I didn't make an announcement, and no, it doesn't. Oh yeah, there it is. See? Zip. It all follows it. So maybe that's properly the way how I would do it. And then this thing we can extrude 6 inches. And there we see now the part got extruded. Okay, let's say here. I'm going back. I'm deleting all this because this tiny line there, I'm simply going to remove. So for the sake of quick concept modeling, we have it a little bit easier. So I'm going to repeat simply what we did. So 4 feet, make another sketch on this face there, zip and zip, extrude this one, shift this one 6 inches there, and you see now there everything is pretty nice, looks good. Yeah. Okay, so let's say they also need a shelf below. Now there are multiple ways how we can do this. Remember how I drew something on the wall here and then extruded it out, or on the floor? So each way really works. In this case, actually, I'm simply going to draw it maybe on, I'm still drawing it on the floor, so edit there. And maybe let's say the shelf should be a little bit more inside. There, okay. And then what I'm going to do, because now I would like, I could, for example, extrude this one up 6 inches, new body there. Okay, no, let's say that's a little bit heavy, 2 inches there, and then the whole object we move up as much as we need, and there we're done. Okay, see, that works pretty well, man. And if we adjust this one, you see the plate moves with it. If, for example, this part should be nicely rounded, or we could go ahead and say here, this corner, so that don't bump into it, hurt themselves, we simply round those. Maybe we can do a little bit of edge rounding also here along those lines. Just a notch there. See, it's really that difficult. Again, the confusing part at the beginning is to understand how maybe to do something. I hope that basically this process showed you kind of like the two most common variations. You can draw something on faces and then extrude something out of it, or like what I did, you can all project it onto your ground plane. So we can always go into a top view, hide all the bodies, and then we can see perfectly our layout. And my really crappy drawing, I thought like I snapped to it there. And this gives you a really nice overview, like spatial wise, how much surface or space do you, for example, use up inside the sketch. Because if we project things onto the walls and extrude it out, we can't really see it that way. So we would have to make that sketch then later for the top view or the floor plan view again. It's kind of like double work, which is the reason why I like doing it the way how draw everything on the floor, extrude, and then if we have to move something with the move command, we simply move them into place. I would like to leave it at this. This basically should give you a good overview about why I'm stressing so much that for next class it is absolutely mandatory and really no excuse. You have 4 days to do this now, to measure out all the different dimensions for your tables, your racks, the height, the width, the lengths, the thickness for the material, like tabletops, etc. You saw that we can always afterwards adjust those a little bit if the Fusion model doesn't turn out to look good. But before we can create a computer model like this, you need to have all those dimensions figured out. So that's going to be your homework for next class, because what you see here is basically a must-have milestone we need to reach by the end of next class. Just as a mild reminder, I put grade percentages onto the homework assignments, simply to give you more incentive to act a little bit more professional. If with a client, if they ask you something, you don't do it, they will basically go to a different designer. And also, as a student, you hurt yourself because you're not putting in the time other students might do, and then they have a better learning outcome. So for your own sake and interest, I'm going to be a little bit more persistent in all these parts. And if you don't do it, because we are really on a tight timeline now, I just simply warn you, if you don't do it, you will fall behind. And at the end of the semester, what will count is what's done. And if stuff is not done, I logically can also not reward a grade for it. Okay, so if you have any questions, shoot me an email. You have my address, and then I will see you on Monday.